Hello, everyone. We're incredibly excited to start off this new podcast series. Our goal is to tackle topics that often go unspoken in today's world. Here at Inner Space, we aim to shed light on these subjects, sparking awareness and fostering open conversations. We've received many thought provoking questions from you, and we are thrilled to have none other than the founder of Inner Space, Sadia Saeed, here to address them. With over 22 years of experience as a psychologist, Sadia has worked extensively with diverse populations. She has provided therapeutic support to individuals, couples, and children. She's also a TEDx speaker and has delivered a talk on mindfulness of emotions. Her book, You're Simply Perfect, is a guide designed to help young people embrace joy, learn from Indian wisdom traditions, and avoid harmful patterns that could impact their mental well being. You can find a copy of the book on our website linked below. The entire Inner Space team is thrilled to embark on this journey with you all. So, without further ado, let's dive in and address our very first question. To start us off, Sadia, let's dive right into the heart of our topic: setbacks and rejections in relationships. I feel that these are experiences that nearly everyone encounters, particularly those aged between 18 to 25. Could you help us understand why these encounters can be very challenging to these people during this phase of life?
That's a very important question because we see this age group, the young adult age group, really having a difficult time with relationships nowadays. And the whole system of dating and relationships has changed in the last few years with apps, and the way people are meeting each other has changed. And so this issue has become even more important as of now. Uh, I would like to, of course, bring Erik Erikson into the picture. He's a psychologist who talked about a very important conflict that occurs in young adulthood. And I'll explain a little bit about this. He called it intimacy versus isolation.
Mhm,
He
mhm.
said that during this age group of 18 to 25 and a little up and down, people are looking for intimacy.
Right.
Intimacy is a very important goal in a person's life at this time.
Mhm.
And when a person is not able to find intimacy, a person feels isolated and a person feels out of, um, like as if they haven't fulfilled what they were meant to fulfill.
Right.
So because intimacy has become such an important goal at this time of life,
Mhm.
it's natural that people are very relationship oriented at this time. And while intimacy can be fulfilled by friends and family, etc., a romantic partner is typically how people look to fulfill that deep sense of intimacy.
Mhm, mhm.
However, in this time, when you're trying to find intimacy and you're trying to relate to others, you are actually having some baggage from the past, experiences and relationships from the past which have been neglectful or traumatic or difficult. And in some sense, you don't feel safe in a relationship or comfortable in a relationship. This time can be fraught with a lot of fear and anxiety. And that
Right.
is one of the reasons why people in this time feel uh, a lot of setback, a lot of uneasiness when they don't find this kind of intimacy.
Right, Sadia. So I think that explains how and why rejections are just so common during this time. And I feel like in your work as well, you would have seen a lot of individuals and couples who have gone through rejections. And I'm sure you would have had some memorable insights. Do you recall any particular experience that showed you the impact of rejections in a relationship? And how do you feel mindfulness contributed to bettering the situation?
Yeah. Yeah, there are too many. So when I have to pick one, it's difficult. And there are too many of different types and different kinds of issues. But one that comes to my mind right away is a very extreme kind of a situation of rejection
Right.
where this couple was seeing each other since their late school days. They had almost a 13-year relationship or a 14-year relationship. And then they were all set to get married. The parents and the families knew each other. And 2 weeks before the wedding, the cards were ready, the trousseau was ready, They had bought a house was there together. Everything, it was set up, it was decorated, renovated, everything ready to move in. When the the man kind of left and
Right.
disappeared for a few
Oh,
days and was just not to be heard of.
right. Okay.
And then initially it felt like this could be, something must have happened. And then later they realized that he left of his own will. He wrote to somebody, he told a relative or a cousin that he's left of his own will. He does not want to get married.
Okay.
And that's when the girl came to me,
Mm-hmm.
and she had no clue. And this has not happened once. Something like this I have worked with a few times.
All right.
So this is a situation of extreme rejection because your
Right.
entire life has been sort of planned
Mm-hmm.
with someone. You look for to you look forward to a life with somebody in a certain way. You've made plans, you've talked, so many things have been there, and now it's all come crumbling down. And it's a very, very deep form of rejection. And I'm using an extreme example to say that, uh, just to get you an understanding of how even very difficult spaces of rejection can be worked with.
Right. Right.
So the first thing is, of course, there's a great deal of despair and a great deal of crying, depression, almost not being able to eat, you
Mm-hmm.
know, nights awake, just not sleeping, like extreme
Mm-hmm.
dysregulation in the body and the mind, which is completely understandable in the situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what I found was that initially the feelings of despair were so high that she was unable to even access her anger. She was
Mm-hmm.
unable to even access her, you know, uh, frustration, the questions: why me? Why wouldn't he speak to me? Why didn't he tell me what was going on? Was I such a bad partner? Was I so unavailable that I couldn't listen? Like blaming oneself, blaming the other, the whys, and the answers were
Right.
not there, and the answers were not going to come because the other
Yeah.
person had left.
Mm-hmm.
So we spend a lot of time validating these feelings and emotions. It was very important for that person to feel that they cannot just overcome this despair. This is deeply, deeply painful,
Right.
and that it's okay to now be in this pain for some time. They are
Mm-hmm.
not expected to snap out of it. And most others around you give you some kind of a, you know, in their motivation to help, but they tell
Yeah.
you, okay, get over it. I always knew he was not the right person for you.
Yeah.
And some stuff like this doesn't always help because it doesn't provide you answers inside. So we worked for a long time to help do two things: regulate the body
Yeah.
through working with some breathing practices, and to validate the feelings.
Right.
Then, after some time, when we worked with validating feelings and really accessing feelings, she was able to access more anger. Now, this
Okay.
took months. This took months. And over months, initially, there was no meditation and mindfulness practice because she was
Right.
overwhelmed. So, this is not the time to introduce. That time, you just introduce relaxation, breathing practices. But slowly, as she settled with the idea, as a month or two had passed from this event, and she was more settled to the idea and more accepting of the change that was there in her life, then we worked with meditation and mindfulness, which helped to deeply settle, understand also that uh, one doesn't have to blame anybody, one doesn't
Yeah.
have to necessarily judge anybody out of this, and whatever that person would have left with would be their own difficulties and issues, their inability to communicate. There's no point finding a blame space, but there
Right.
is an okayness in being with the emotions that are left behind.
Mm-hmm.
The thing with human beings is, if we don't find somebody to blame, we don't know what to do with the emotion.
Yeah. True.
So, sitting with the emotion without having to blame, sitting with the emotion without blaming yourself or your partner
Mm-hmm.
was primarily the work. And then over a period of time, she was able to kind of reach out to people she had not reached out to, get back to exercising, get back to taking care of herself,
Right.
keeping herself as a primary focus, the relationship with herself as more important. And after a while, she was actually doing quite well. I met her after a year and a half, and she was actually doing quite well. So,
That's great. Yeah, that sounds very
so
promising.
It is.
Yeah.
But you have to go through those difficult 3 6 months and stay put without getting drawn into that downward spiral of, I am at fault or someone else is at fault.
Right, right. And that is
That's
the most
crucial.
difficult part, I feel,
Yeah.
especially navigating through those emotions while you're going through a setback, or if there's some sort of like a deep rejection that you're facing. And a lot of the people who ask the questions were curious to know, like, how can mindfulness act as a an important tool that they can use, like an easily accessible tool? Because in this example, it felt more like it came up much later in the work. But how can we actually use it easily, like, as a
Yeah.
tool to manage, I would call it the emotional roller coaster that people go through.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. See, the most important contribution of mindfulness or self awareness
Hmm.
is this idea of keeping your mind here instead
Right.
of letting it all the time go into these mental stories of blame,
Hmm.
fear, uh, rejection of oneself.
Right.
Because these are typically things the mind says after there has been a rejection. Either the mind says you're not good enough,
Yeah.
therefore you've been rejected, or the mind says the other person is an issue, it's all their fault and their problem, and is unwilling to see anything else,
Hmm.
right? Or it gets into a mental story of how your life is going to be, you're going to be left out without relationships, how your life is going to be going forward, you've never formed healthy relationships, these are your problems in relationships, how will you overcome these problems? Then fixing mind of, okay, I should do this, I should do that, maybe I should not do this, maybe I should just never get into relationships, all kinds of stories.
Right.
And these stories are, it's just a way of dealing with emotions. What you're actually going through is fear or pain.
Hmm.
Either it's the pain or sadness of the rejection or being lonely. So the
Right.
reality is loneliness, pain, fear. But the mind is not waiting to feel the pain, feel the fear, and work with it. It's going into just some kind of storytelling. So, what mindfulness helps you to do is to disconnect from these stories,
Right.
come back to the present, look at what are you feeling right now. So, you
Hmm.
ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? And
Right.
then you sit with what you're feeling right now and say, okay, I am sad. And it's natural to be sad when you're rejected by someone. Or I'm lonely. It's natural to be lonely when you've lost a partner who was there in your life for some time. It's
Hmm.
natural to be lonely, right? And I don't have to immediately do away with this loneliness. So
Right.
people who are meditators, people who practice, and it's not just an idea, oh, I'll come to the present. It's a practice
Hmm.
of staying with yourself, knowing how to stay with yourself. And people who meditate, people who practice can sit with this for long periods of time without distracting themselves,
Right.
without running away, without fixing it, waiting, and also showing that compassion, because compassion is a very important aspect of the practice. Showing
Absolutely.
that compassion that I am in pain right now, I need myself right now, I'll just be with myself right now, I won't escape.
Right.
And that creates space for an emotion to process and become lighter and become more easy to manage and handle.
Right. That does make a lot of sense. Yeah. And something that really stood out to me is the word stories, all these stories that we tell ourselves, right? And they really do sound like negative thoughts, negative thought patterns that we engage in. Um, and based off on the conversation that we've had so far, it really does show that these negative thoughts tend to amplify the pain of rejection quite a bit.
Absolutely.
Right. So, what kind of guidance would you extend to young adults who are engaging in such self critical and self blaming thoughts, especially after facing rejection?
Yeah. In my book, which I wrote for teenagers and tweens and teens,
Right.
I explain a simple concept that the truth is not the story, and the story is not the truth. The
Wow.
story our mind tells us is not the truth. It's never the truth,
Right.
because the mind has an inherent negativity bias. A human mind is inherently biased towards the negative. In fact, Rick Hansen says that The mind is like Velcro for negative experiences and Teflon for positive experiences, which means
Wow.
negative experiences stick and
Right.
positive experiences just glide
Get,
off like a
yeah.
non-stick pan.
Hmm.
Okay. And we have to know this about ourselves. It's very important to be cognizant that my mind is oriented
Right.
towards negatives. Given a choice, it's not going to look at all the things that are going well in my world. Given a choice, it's going to nitpick on what's not going okay. And so, when the mind is constantly going down this negative spirals, it's important to recognize that these are not the truths. This is a story my mind is telling me,
Right. Right.
right? And what we do in meditation and mindfulness is we train our brain to recognize this and to come back to the present continuously and choose the present over um,
Stories.
this tendency of
Yeah.
storytelling.
Yeah.
So we continuously remind our brain, no, the story is not the present, it's not the
Yeah.
truth right now, it's my negativity bias in action. I choose the present. How do I choose the present? Okay, I'm drinking water, I choose to focus. I'm talking to
Hmm.
Parvati, I choose to focus. I'm
Right.
doing this work, I choose to focus. I'm sitting on a chair, I choose to focus on sitting on a chair. Initially,
Right.
it'll appear boring. What am I even doing? Why should I focus on just sitting on a chair? Or why should I focus on my breath? I'm breathing the whole day. What's the point? But this focus or this
Yeah.
tendency to bring focus back is
Hmm.
every time you do this, it teaches your brain that this is more important than the story. This is more important than the story. And slowly, your brain starts to get rewired. It's wired to go to negative, it rewires to stay in the present and appreciate what's there right now. And over years, when this training has happened over years, right? Your brain is trained to become negative also evolutionally and over years.
True.
Over years of practice, it retrains to enjoy life and have a good time with what little is there. And that's very relieving and very freeing.
Absolutely. It's a very different thought from, what we hear so far, well, what you heard so far, to be honest, because it just goes to show how these little changes can actually create a huge change in the long run.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. So,
Absolutely. And that is the practice, these small steps. It's
right.
only bringing your mind back, and every single time that you bring your mind back to the present,
Yeah.
every time you're making that one dent in your wiring.
Right.
Every time it's a speed breaker on a highway reminding you, oh, I need to slow down. I don't need to go that. I don't need to. And slowly, the new pathways, new neural pathways. In fact, studies have shown, neuroscience studies have shown that new neural pathways open up and old
Wow.
pathways are no longer accessed and new pathways start to get accessed when you practice like this. So you actually get a change in your brain functioning and structure, and it can happen in as little as 8 weeks. It can start
Wow.
with as little as 8 weeks.
And that's all it
Imagine.
takes. Wow.
8 weeks, then you have to continue. It will go back. But
Right.
in 8 weeks, you can start seeing changes.
I feel like a lot of our listeners who are listening to this today would be really happy to know that, like, that's all it takes to feel better,
Yeah,
to make a positive change in
yeah,
your life,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I feel like something that I was very interested to know, and something that's very commonly spoken about in the, even in the online space regarding relationships, is communication. And we all know how important communication is. A lot of the reels that we see online these days, they talk about how effective and key communication is in any relationship. And what I've noticed personally, and I've heard a lot of people say that it's very difficult to communicate properly and even in a healthy way, especially during setbacks or if you're going through some sort of a conflict with your partner. So, if there are any pieces of advice that you could give to our listeners on how we can have healthy and open conversations during and communication basically during times of emotional distress.
Yeah. I would say one of the things that I have understood in my experience in life is a partnership that allows for honesty and transparency is a partnership that will last. And a
Absolutely.
partnership that is based on hiding because you're worried about hurting the other person. because you're afraid the other person can't tolerate your truths, because you're afraid that the other person cannot handle what you feel,
Right.
is a partnership that is not going to work very well in times like this, which are very trying times for relationships, because the roles are changing. The complementarity of roles in a relationship are changing. And the last uh, 30, 40 years, we've seen massive changes in the way a marriage works, a relationship works, dating works, right?
True.
So I feel that increasingly intimacy is possible when a person feels fully be like they are fully seen,
Yeah.
and they are free to be heard. They're free to say what they think,
Right.
and even if it hurts their partner, it may hurt. The partner is able to infuse such trust in the relationship that even if I'm hurt, I can tolerate this. I can
Right.
take this,
Right.
right? And that is a communication pattern that we want to create, where I think honesty is primary, where you
Right.
can tell your partner how you feel, however painful that is, right? And
Mm.
that relationship, I feel, has a very, very high chance of surviving, because when people feel heard and seen, they feel comfortable to stay. They don't
Right.
feel like running away from those partnerships. So that's one. I would say that putting this honesty and transparency out there, and in that sense, making yourself vulnerable,
Wow. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because when you're honest and you're going to say what you feel,
Right.
you are vulnerable. You're going to be opening yourself up to a lot more rejection. You're going to be opening yourself up to a lot more hurt when
Mm-hmm.
the partner is angry with you, upset with you, and you'll have to go through all this. But it's worth going through all this to find a healthy partnership, is what I believe. The second thing I feel that I must absolutely mention in the communication space is, which also I increasingly see, is uh, unknowingly we play games. We play games of not giving too much importance to someone who shows a lot of love, giving more importance to people who show less,
Mm-hmm.
wanting a chase, wanting to chase, wanting to be chased, wanting to be pursued, wanting to pursue, having
Yeah.
that thrill of pursuit. Especially early in the dating games, a lot of games. Recently, I think you only spoke about the word, you gave a name to it called breadcrumbing, which I didn't know.
Yeah. Yeah. That
Breadcrumbing.
it's very
But
new, but it really
the
does
game is
infuse
old,
it.
the
Yeah.
name is new, the game is
True.
old.
True. True. Old wine
So,
in a new bottle.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So, all these games, okay, instead of upfront saying, this is what I feel,
Mm-hmm.
uh, creating these kind of uh, patterns, unspoken games. These are maybe thrilling for some
Right.
time, but they are definitely not going to lead to intimacy, emotional, physical, mental intimacy, which you're actually looking for. If we have to trust Eric Erickson, as I spoke,
Yeah.
you're actually looking for that. And that's going to create deep fulfillment in some sense in young adulthood. So I would say that you actively recognize that you're following these patterns and let them go to the extent you can. I
Right.
think these are the two things I would put on the top of the
Right.
communication. I think a third thing would be, it's not so much communication, but I think it comes to my mind, which is allowing space in relationships, allowing people to be who they are. Now, that may not be communication, but through your body language, through your verbal and non-verbal ways, you inhibit people from being themselves.
Right. Right.
Instead of encouraging people to be themselves, their true selves,
Mm-hmm.
we inhibit others from being themselves. We kind of show them that we don't like them for who they
Mm-hmm.
are. Instead of clearly saying we don't like this act or this is harming us in this way, and
Right.
we don't examine our own baggage in that. Okay.
Right.
If somebody, for example, likes to hang out with friends, and the other person says, oh, you don't like to hang out with me, you just care to hang out with your friends, then it's not healthy communication. It's not recognizing the need to connect with others, and also not recognizing your own difficulty in staying alone.
Right. Right.
S- Right? So these introspections and self-awareness and self-examination is very important when you're going to be in a partnership with someone.
Yeah,
in
and that's what I
relationship.
feel is the most difficult part of the communication, because even though communication is like a two-way street, a lot of people tend to not focus on what they can do to make the process smoother,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
We don't examine ourselves.
yeah,
We want other people to complete us, fulfill us, but we don't look at the pain we have come into the relationship with before they were ever in the picture.
right, right.
Okay, and if I come into the relationship with a pain, and I
Mm-hmm.
and I expect you to heal my pain, and you don't even know the pain I have, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm not communicating the pain to you, and I'm not even telling you how it's going to be healed,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a invalid expectation, right? It's going to destroy the love and the connection that is there.
It's very, I mean, these are all food for thought, I feel, a lot of people. And something that I also wanted to bring into the picture is resilience, right? The ability to bounce back after coming out of rejection. And as you rightly put, Sadia, like rejections are very commonplace, even if it's not a outright rejection. Maybe a conflict or a rejection of some sort is inevitable in every relationship. And I feel like for the relationship to work out, there should be some amount of resilience to come back after each conflict and work on it and start afresh. And if there are any techniques or strategies that the young people can use um, to grapple with this sort of a rejection, any activity or any particular exercise that you believe everyone should follow to foster that kind of resilience?
Yeah, I think a reality check is one of the first techniques to follow, which is
Yeah,
that you're see, even before you get into a relationship, you are more likely to be rejected than not.
true.
First of all,
Yeah,
because there are so many people and you're going
yeah,
to connect only with a few, and only a
yeah,
few are going to connect with you. You have
yeah.
to be prepared to be rejected. It's like if you're in a class and coming first is your ideal,
Mm-hmm.
you have to be prepared. In a class of 40, only one can come first.
True.
The other 39 will cannot come first.
Right.
So you can be one of those 39. Most probably you will be one of those 39.
Yeah.
Is a reality check,
Right.
correct? And so in the idea that I should not be rejected at all,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the idea people go with. They are
Yeah.
okay to reject, but they cannot be rejected.
Mm. Okay.
Is a statistically improbable idea. So it's just
Yeah.
mathematically not going to work out,
Right. Right.
right? So when you enter even in a dating space, the likelihood that you will be rejected is quite high.
Yeah.
One has to enter with that understanding. That's one.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, in a relationship, one has to enter one. Let's say you connect with somebody, you're in a relationship, one has to understand that the likelihood of conflict is going to be high because
Yeah.
people are coming from different backgrounds with different stuff and also different baggages, both of
True.
which often are unexamined.
Mm-hmm.
How many people sit to do their own personal work before entering into relationships? I don't think many people even think that's a requirement,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But we come into relationships with a lot of baggage. We've been hurt in the past, we've been neglected, or we've been overprotected, we've been smothered, we've been free, we've not been free. The way we find relationships safe, unsafe, we could be very needy in relationships, we could be very attention seeking in relationships. Where do we look at ourselves that I have a high need for attention and so I'm unhappy in a
Right.
relationship, right? So I feel when conflicts come up, they are opportunities for true self examination.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of quickly blaming others,
Right.
true self examination. And that doesn't mean self blame, it simply means recognizing this is my baggage.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's all. Just recognizing this is my baggage, this is my stuff, and this is the piece I need to work with.
Mm-hmm.
And when partners are really honest with each other and comfortable, I've seen partners ask each other also, what do you think I need to work with? and take that
Right.
feedback, because your partner actually is the closest observer. They could be biased, yes, but also they can see subconscious and unconscious patterns in you that you cannot see.
That's interesting. Yeah.
They're probably your closest observers.
Hmm.
So genuine feedback from them is can be very helpful in an honest relationship. Can be very helpful.
Right. I've read that, we heal in relationships quite a bit. And I feel like this point really ties in with this concept that we cannot heal alone. We heal a lot through our relationships.
Absolutely.
And our partners can be a great mirror to show us, these are potential areas of development. And it really does tie everything together. And even
Absolutely.
the part where you mentioned that, there's a lot of self reflection that is required. And I feel that mindfulness can also contribute to improving that sort of self awareness in
Absolutely.
relationships. Yeah.
In fact, it's the only tool, because your self awareness cannot grow
Hmm.
unless it is in, like, at that point where you're checking it. That point has to be now.
Right.
Unless you come back into the now, how do you go in? Like, if you want to know yourself, or what you did, or what pattern is coming up right now, or let's say
Hmm.
you're feeling jealous right now and that's a pattern, or let's say you're feeling insecure right now and that's a pattern, where is that point where you can enter into that field of jealousy and recognize it? Only in this moment.
Hmm. True.
In your head you can say, yes, I tend to be jealous, but if I tell you, okay, recognize when you're jealous, it will be now, in that
Hmm.
moment when you feel jealous. And how will you recognize it? You will ask yourself, how am I experiencing jealousy? And you will find that maybe your chest is tight, maybe your hands are tight. You will find
Clenched.
physical manifestations of that jealousy in your body. And
Right.
if you are mindful and you've practiced a little, which means you are also compassionate and little non-judgmental towards yourself, you can sit with that jealousy and say, okay, it's human to be jealous, and I'll just stay and look at my jealousy for some time instead of cursing myself for it or blaming my partner for it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that's where mindfulness helps you. It's that point of entry into what's happening now.
Wow. That's very interesting, Satya.
Yeah.
And
And that's why I feel that we just treat it like some fluff practice, and it's become, oh, be smelling a rose as mindfulness, and having a green cup of green tea and peace
yeah.
as mindfulness. Okay, that's mindfulness, but that's just superficial. Like, that's just not
Right.
superficial, but just like, okay, that's just some nice feeling things. But real mindfulness is when you can sit with pain and difficulty also. You can sit with joy also. You can sit with pleasure also. You can sit with pain also. You train yourself for that level of resilience where you're able to sit with things
Mhm.
as they are without getting into mental stories, running away, escaping, distracting, fixing. That's what we
Right.
are trying to do here. So that's the real work.
Yeah. And I feel that that's why it takes time, and that's why it's called a practice, like a mindfulness
Absolutely.
practice. Right.
Absolutely. And that builds resilience, the ability to
Yeah.
stay.
Yeah. Just to come back from
Yeah. Yeah.
difficult situations.
And to
Uh,
contain, okay, there's a conflict, it's painful. I can contain it. I can be here with that
right.
conflict without running away, hiding, or doing any of that stuff, which is my habit.
Right.
I
Right.
can be here, I can contain it. And that's resilience.
Right. So, Sadia, something that's also a very pressing topic in the space of relationships is the fear of intimacy. I've seen a lot of individuals who say that I have a very strong fear of intimacy. I'm afraid of getting too close, too personal with an individual. And how do these factors come about, right? How do they come into play? And why does it lead people to self sabotage or move away from actual meaningful connections?
Yeah. So, uh, like I was telling earlier, that we carry a lot of baggage from our early relationships.
Right.
And psychologists have studied this, like, for a long time, what we call attachment issues.
Hmm.
And you could have an anxious attachment, or you could have an avoidant attachment, typically, or you could have an anxious avoidant attachment, or you could have a secure attachment, different attachment styles. Now, typically, an anxious attachment is when you don't feel comfortable without a relationship.
Right.
That's the opposite of fear of intimacy,
Yeah.
where you're very needy. And when you
Hmm.
don't have a relationship, you just don't feel good enough. So
Right.
you're perpetually seeking validation in the form of a relationship,
Right.
validation in the form of attention. And anytime there's a threat, a conflict, a potential rejection, it brings up a lot of overwhelm and fear in you,
Right.
right? The opposite of this is avoidant attachment, which is fear of intimacy,
Hmm.
where relationships have not been perceived as comfortable and safe.
Right.
Either the relationships are consuming, or the relationship space feels like, while a person wants it,
Hmm.
it just feels too much to handle. It feels like
Right.
they will get consumed, their freedom would go away, they would get trapped.
Hmm.
Uh, and so there's a lot of, like, we see this in commitment phobia, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is fear that if I say yes, I will get stuck
Hmm.
and then never be able to come out.
Right.
And because of this, even though the need for intimacy is there, people choose to stay away
Hmm.
and ultimately feel isolated, even if they have multiple sexual partners, because they don't have an intimate connection. There is a sense
Right.
of isolation, because intimacy is not about just having sexual connection, it's about having real, meaningful connection with
Yeah.
people. And because of commitment phobia and because of fear of intimacy, people sometimes choose multiple sexual partners, keep moving between relationships, don't let anything get serious. These patterns are there in a lot of people. And if things get serious, even within a relationship, they withdraw.
Right.
So, this is all coming from not perceiving relational spaces as safe.
Mhm.
And this definitely has to do with early childhood uh, relationships, because attachment issues do get established very early, and also then later on there's a build up of how they have perceived relationships.
Right. Right.
So a classic model that you will see is this pursuer distancer model in relationships,
Mhm.
where one is always pursuing, wants more intimacy, and the partner is distancing and is acting like there is no intimacy issue.
Right.
And so you'll find one partner saying, we don't spend enough time together, we should do more together, why don't we go to a therapist, why don't we address our issues? And
Hmm.
the other partner is, I don't see a problem, I don't know what you're making this ruckus about. What is the
Right.
issue? We are living fine, we are doing okay. And so this is a classic pattern of anxious and avoidant partnerships, where one partner is saying that I want more connection, more intimacy, I'm not feeling it's enough.
Hmm.
Is it truly not enough, or is it one's own need is not examined?
Right.
And the other partner is rejecting and not addressing that need because they want to keep it like it's all fine.
Right.
They
Right.
continue to do their own things and do not address this need. And this pattern just continues and continues, when it becomes a pattern of lot of resentment, lot of nagging, lot of uh, sarcastic talking to
Mhm.
each
Mhm.
other, a lot of underhanded statements, poking at each other. This is a very common pattern that we see in relationships, but this is coming out of the same kind of a attachment difficulty, anxious avoidant attachment.
Right. And it's become very common to understand this these days. Like a lot of individuals already have this sort of understanding of attachment patterns. And we've spoken elaborately on, similar challenges today in our conversation. Challenges about, moving through a rejection in the relationship, and also uh, managing the emotions, the upheaval, and everything that comes up, especially during a rejection. And we also touched upon something that's very commonly spoken about these days, which is the fear of intimacy. And it's such an important issue to understand because it's so common these days, especially with the dating scene. It's become increasingly common. Right. So we did speak about quite a lot of interesting topics, right from rejections, how to navigate through the emotions that come up. We even dived deep into how mindfulness can help us to overcome such situations, right? And before we bring our conversation to a close, could you leave our young listeners with some words of wisdom or encouragement? And I believe that your insights could really offer a lot of support to those who are navigating through challenging times in their relationships.
Sure. I think the only thing that's remaining and that's coming to my mind is this idea that your relationship with yourself
Mhm.
decides your relationship with others.
Right.
And if you are not kind to yourself, if you blame yourself, if you're too critical with yourself, if you're not loving to yourself, if you're not proud of yourself, if you don't give enough space to yourself, um, it's unlikely that you will have healthy relationships with others, because how
Yeah.
you treat yourself, how you relate to yourself, is how others relate naturally to you. It's also the kind of partners you find. Like
Mhm.
if you're loving, you naturally attract people who also are respectful of you, who
Right.
also can show that respect, because you are not able to handle a disrespectful space. But because you're disrespectful to yourself,
Mhm.
it's okay to have a partner who's not respectful, and then get
Right.
upset with that partner. So
Yeah.
what we do with ourselves decides the kind of partners we choose, and decides how our relationships are going to be. So I would
Mhm.
say we spend a lot of energy on Tinder and on dating sites and on trying to resolve issues with our partners. Let's spend a lot more than that, I think, energy on establishing a relationship with ourselves,
Yeah.
and actually creating space to be free and alone with yourself. And loving yourself just does not mean going to a spa and buying yourself a chocolate. It
Self care.
means really
Yeah.
spending time with yourself, with your emotions, being kind to yourself when you're feeling down, being loving to yourself when you're feeling jealous.
Yeah.
That's what it means. That's what real self love, self care, and real uh, relationship development with oneself is. So I would say that invest in that for your own mental health. I would definitely say learn to meditate. I know it sounds like it's for everybody, but I really believe that
Yeah.
sitting with yourself for some time every day and keeping your mind in, trying to be in this one place, even though the mind keeps shifting, but trying to bring the mind back, recognizing that real life moment to moment is more crucial, more important than some mental story. These are very, very valuable things to learn in life, and
Right.
they will help you through your life, through relationships, through work, through old age. So definitely take time out, learn to meditate, learn to take care of yourself, be compassionate, and there are solutions for everything, and things become easy. Nothing
Yeah.
stays the same. So, yeah, don't spend copious amounts of time in your mind creating stories.
Well, that really does give a lot of hope to our listeners. I'm sure it would have really struck a chord with them. And thank you so much. And heartfelt gratitude, Sadia, for sharing your profound wisdom and insights with us today. And yes, thank you to all our listeners for tuning in and joining us on this journey. We really hope we have addressed all your questions. And if you have any more questions, please do not hesitate to leave comments and we'll do our best to respond. And it's been an absolute privilege to discuss this topic with you, ma'am, and diving into the intricate dynamics of handling setbacks and rejections within relationships. And to all our listeners, please remember that setbacks are merely chapters in your life story and it is not the entire book. So keep learning, keep growing, and embrace your journey. And until next time, stay resilient and continue to shine. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Much love to everyone.